Tonight on Greater Boston, as the people of Ukraine rally to push back Russian invaders, and nearly every other country in the world rallies against Putin, the director of the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute, Serhiy Plokhy, joins me on a remarkable people and a murderous foe. Then later, a former Harvard Law School friend of federal Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson on her historic nomination to the Supreme Court. And finally, 14-year-old Johnathan Coucelos, who accused several of his Woburn High football teammates of sexually assaulting, bullying, and threatening him. He joins me for his first TV interview after the new accusation that school officials knew about complaints like his for years and did nothing. It is impossible to overstate the magnitude and historic nature of what's happening on the world stage. Outnumbered and outarmed, Ukrainians are putting up a hell of a fight against Russian invaders, but they're also calling for outside help now. President Zelensky has formally requested membership with the EU, which he's calling to be fast-tracked. And for the first time in its history, the European Union is buying and delivering weapons to Ukraine. In another historic first, Switzerland is foregoing its usual stance of neutrality and is adopting the same sanctions against Russia as the rest of the EU. And this afternoon, the UN General Assembly convened in an emergency session for the first time in 40 years to address all this. And the International Criminal Court announced it's opening an investigation into possible war crimes against humanity in Ukraine. And while Russian and Ukrainian officials did hold a first round of peace talks today, with supposedly more to come, Putin has put Russia's nuclear forces on alert, even as he faces growing and courageous unrest at home, with many Russian citizens protesting in the streets. I'm joined by Serhiy Plokhy, the director of the Ukrainian Research Institute and professor of Ukrainian history at Harvard University. Pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
You know, a couple of weeks ago, most people on the world stage were saying the Ukrainian people would be overwhelmed in a number of days. Zelensky was not strong enough to lead this country through this. Nobody is saying that now. Were you surprised by the resilience and strength of both the Ukrainian people and their leader?
Both surprised and not at the same time. I certainly knew that Ukrainians would resist. So I knew that quite well from my friends, from my colleagues. I was surprised that they were able to overcome differences, political, regional, and otherwise, that really divided the country even a few days before the start of the invasion. And all unite around the leader that before that was very divisive in that country. Yeah. But now all political parties, all major leaders, military, civilians are behind President Zelensky.
Amazing, inspirational moment, I should say. You know, not long before the invasion, Zelensky was accusing the West. He actually used the word of appeasement of Russia, obviously. Do the Ukrainians and their leader feel the West is doing enough to come to their support?
They're very appreciative for what is happening, but they want certainly more. They want more support. The one specific issue that they want at this time is to close skies over Ukraine, and there is almost kind of a saying there, go and close the skies and we will do the rest. Yeah. So that is the most immediate request. Again, there is no certain illusion that NATO would interfere in any other way. But they, as President Zelensky said, he didn't need a ride when he was offered to be somehow taken away from the capital of Ukraine. He needed ammunition.
One of the best lines I've ever heard, I should say, in an international crisis. Brilliant and on point. Is there as I mentioned, I'm sure everybody knows, the two sides, mid-level, met today on the Belarusian border. Is there an outcome that would be acceptable to Ukraine at this point that would also provide an off-ramp for Putin?
I hope that there can be reached an agreement. What I am sure about is that the conditions for that agreement would be very different from the ones that would be reached on the first day of the invasion. When President Zelensky specifically said that Well, we are not members of NATO, so we really have nothing to lose by negotiating maybe a neutral status for our country. And now, after Ukrainians resisted, after army showed itself capable of fighting back, I'm not sure that can serve as the platform for the negotiations. It can be, but certainly the situation has changed quite dramatically in the last few days.
You know, speaking of change dramatically, and the conventional wisdom is Putin never expected this level of resistance. A lot of people, myself included, have thought about the mistake that the United States made in Iraq. What we learned after the fact is regime change is the easy part. Holding on to the country after regime change is not so easy. What's your sense, if the worst were to happen and Zelensky were removed by the Russians and a puppet put in place, what do you think happens after that with the Ukrainian population, with a Russian leadership?
Well, first of all, no government, president, parliament, government, any kind of government would be considered to be legitimate by Ukrainians. And this is a big issue. Ukrainians would be put back in maybe the most natural position in which they have been for a long period of time. The Ukrainian nation came into existence in opposition to different regimes and different empires and different governments that were not considered to be legitimate. So the Ukrainians do very well all forms of resistance to the regimes and to the government that they're not theirs. They maybe have a challenge living in a state of their own, in the sense of that there can be divisions. But once there is an outside force coming in, they're all united like they're united today.
And of course, everybody watching hopes that doesn't happen. Before you leave, I'm assuming you have family and friends in Ukraine. If you do, how are they surviving these days?
Well, I'm twice per day talking to members of my family, to my sister in particular. It's very tense. Again, there is shelling in the city where she lives. I will not name the city, but it's close now to the front line. The front line is moving there. So each morning we start a conversation saying, okay, how was the night? Did you sleep? So, okay, one more day passed. Thank God it was a good day. Let's hope the next night will be good. So that is, you just live one day at a time, one night at a time. And I am sure that this is the situation in many parts of Ukraine.
Well, I wish your family, your sister in particular, security into the long haul. And I thank you so much for your thoughts and your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Joe Biden promised to nominate the first black woman to the Supreme Court, and on Friday, he did just that, naming federal appeals court Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson as his pick to succeed Justice Stephen Breyer, for whom she clerked earlier in her career. Jackson is a Harvard grad, has served on the commission that develops federal sentencing policy, and if confirmed, she would also be the first former public defender on the high court. I'm joined now by Njeri Rutledge. She's a law professor at South Texas College of Law in Houston, who attended Harvard Law with Judge Jackson, where they were both active in the Harvard Black Law Students Association. Pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You wrote a great piece about this in The Hill. You said you were driving your daughter to school when you heard the news. What was your reaction?
Joy, pure joy, pride. My daughter kept saying, Mommy, pull over. You're going to have an accident, because my phone was beeping, and I was trying to read the messages, and I just wanted, the final word. Now, I had heard that the president was going to make his decision Thursday. So I was already getting pings, but no one knew who it was going to be, or at least they didn't tell me. So I was just overjoyed. And
is your daughter old enough to have had a reaction to the announcement, or just to your reaction to the announcement?
A little bit of both. My daughter is 12 years old.
Oh.
And the importance of representation. I actually asked her why she thought it mattered that a Black woman was going to be on the Supreme Court. And I was really proud of her answer. She said it means that it shows the world that we can do more than perform and cook. that there are so many things that we can do and so many doors that are open. So I think she really does have a great understanding.
You know, the favorite line that I've read written about the judge since she's first started being considered maybe a month or so ago was yours in The Hill. I want to read it. Again, you lived in the same residence hall. You're part of the Black Law Students Association together. This is your quote: "Being brilliant and down to earth is not a combination I often encountered at Harvard Law School." You want to elaborate just a drop?
Well, Harvard was a bit of a culture shock for me. I grew up in the South. I'm from the South, and Harvard and Boston was a little bit of a transition. At Harvard, there were a lot of really smart people, but there were some people who were a bit cutthroat. There were some people who weren't very friendly. There were some people who were arrogant. And because I always consider myself fairly nice and down to earth, I gravitated to like-minded people. Ketanji was just as sweet as she could be, always. And at the same time, just absolutely brilliant and hardworking.
You know, you wrote about, of all the people you encountered at Harvard, she's going to encounter 100 senators. Well, first the Judiciary Committee and more. This is from one of the 3 Republican senators who actually voted for her confirmation of the appeals court, Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. If media reports are accurate and Judge Jackson has been chosen as Supreme Court nominee to replace Justice Breyer, it means the radical left has won President Biden over yet again. And I repeat, this is somebody who voted for her recently. What's your reaction to what Senator Graham has to say?
I'm a bit frustrated by the hypocrisy, but I'm not surprised. In some ways, this is going to be politics as usual. I think if anyone were to give Judge Jackson a fair consideration, there is no question that she is extremely qualified and well-deserving of this position. But if you want to just kind of follow the rank and file of whatever the Republican talking points are, then you're going to say things like that. His statement was disappointing. I'm imagining to hear some similarly foolish and absurd things from Ted Cruz as well as Mitch McConnell.
Well, and also some of those people were talking about affirmative action as if Judge Jackson is not the smartest person in the room, and she is surely one of them. You know, another reaction which sort of surprised and upset me even more than Senator Graham's, I wasn't surprised. A day or two before she was selected, there was a poll. Let me read it to you. This is the AP poll. It said, "How important is it to you personally that a black woman becomes a Supreme Court justice?" And the conclusion is obviously not nearly as important as it is to you or your daughter. 70% of black women, yes. Black men, 54. White women, 26. White men, 16%. Virtually not important at all. What does that say to you about America in 2022? And again, I assume everybody watching knows there has never been a black woman on the Supreme Court of the United States. And I think it's a total of 7 non-white men in the history of the Supreme Court, if I'm right. What's your reaction to that?
A bit disappointed. It has been 233 years of the Supreme Court's history where we have never had a black woman. I think perhaps the country is a bit fatigued. We went from electing our first black president with everyone feeling hopeful and excited to going to a very different direction with President Trump. And I think perhaps some people are just fatigued and more apathetic. I don't think necessarily they don't want a black woman on the Supreme Court. I think we are in a mindset of this country right now of being a bit self-centered. And unless they can see how it impacts them directly, I think some people just don't care. And I think it's important for people to care, because this is not just a victory for black women or black Americans. This is a great victory for everyone who respects the Constitution. 2
very quick final questions about her, how she dealt with other people, and you mentioned the kindness factor. We know that when nominee Kavanaugh was before the Senate committee, he cried and acted like a petulant child when he was, well, it's factually accurate. I mean, it is what it is. He cried and acted like a child. Not exactly a judicial temperament that you're looking for. How does the Judge Jackson respond to criticism?
She's going to respond perfectly to criticism. As a black female in the legal field, we deal with so many microaggressions every single day. I mean, just the whole talk about this is just a quota pick or affirmative action pick is very insulting, and it tries to minimize all the great accomplishments she's had and the hard work. But she's going to take it in stride. She is used to dealing with a vast majority of people, and in the end, she has a wonderful reputation as a consensus builder. So she knows how to work with people of different mindsets and being respectful. So we're not going to see hysterics from Judge Jackson. We're going to see someone who is poised and who will perfectly articulate every question that is given her way.
I want you to know I live about a half mile from Harvard Law School, so if I ever encounter someone who's brilliant and down to earth, I'll give you a call. Fair enough? Thank you.
If you meet Judge Jackson, you will.
Indeed. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And read your piece in The Hill, everybody. It's a terrific piece about the judge. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
A few weeks back, we learned that police were filing criminal charges against several students accused of assaulting a freshman football player at Woburn High School this past fall, video of which was circulated on social media afterward. 14-year-old Johnathan Coucelos said he was jumped by teammates in the locker room, punched, hit with water bottles, and that someone pulled down his pants and grabbed his genitals, just one of several assaults, threats, and instances of bullying against them. But now the Boston Globe is reporting that Woburn High officials knew of complaints about assault and hazing in their football program for years and did nothing about it. The Globe found that in 2018, a 15-year-old player was kicked so hard in the head by a teammate that he stumbled, dazed from the practice field and vomited. And after that, his coach, Jack Belcher, told him to get back on the practice field. That incident was reported to school officials, but the boy's parents say the school failed to address it. And other former players and parents told the Globe that Belcher often encouraged older teammates to, quote, toughen up younger ones. I'm joined now by Johnathan Coucelos, along with his parents, Kevin and Jeannie Coucelos, and their attorney, Peter Hahn. We also reach out to Coach Belcher, Woburn High Principal Jessica Callanan, but have not heard back as of this taping. We did hear from Woburn Superintendent Crowley. He sent us a statement we'll get to in a few minutes. Thank you all for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Johnathan, let me start by complimenting you for your courage to come forward. I know how tough it is. After the September 25th incident, the bullying and harassment did not stop, did it, Johnathan?
No.
What kinds of things did you encounter?
I would be getting assaulted. I would get harassed.
And you got a text, from what I understand, you say, from someone, a fellow student, I think someone on the football team, who asked if you wanted to be raped again. Is that true?
Yes.
How has this affected you personally, Johnathan?
I lost half of my friends. Like it doesn't feel the same anymore to be out in public.
And how about your day-to-day life? Is it harder? Is it different? I mean,
it's just different for me. Everything changed. I used to wake up and go out with like half of my friends, and now I'm just locked up in my room and finally going into a different school. But
you know, Jeannie and Kevin, I want to talk to you. Jeannie, starting with you, how do you feel about how the school system has responded to all of this?
I'm going to speak as a parent and myself as a teacher. I would expect, as even if a principal or a teacher, that they would come out and help any type of children in the situation. I just feel, since all this has been happening, I've been feeling very emotional at times. I've been experiencing a lot of anxiety. I have two little ones as well, and one where he goes to school by himself with no sibling. I'm just off guard. I'm nervous of what's going to happen next.
Kevin, let me read to you something I'm sure you've seen. The Woburn Public School Superintendent, Matthew Crowley, sent this to the Woburn community on February 15th. I wish to be unequivocal in the fact that I join every member of the administration in condemning physical and sexual violence in all forms. We're committed to a thorough, multifaceted fact-finding operation. We pledge to be forthcoming regarding the results of those investigations and to enact their findings and recommendations. And several months earlier, on December 17th, in a statement to the Globe, Crowley said, "We acknowledge and support the student and family." What's your reaction to what Crowley has had to say?
That's a completely lie. That's a totally lie. There's no support. They haven't given my son or even us any support whatsoever. It's just so wrong of how they're handling it. It gets me emotional every time I have to talk about this because how the school system completely failed to protect one of their students. Us as a parent, when we drop our kids off at school, they're in charge of our kids. And they failed.
Peter, can I get you into this conversation? What is the status? My understanding is charges were brought against 7 of these young people. Am I right about that? And what's the status of those charges?
Jim, first of all, you asked Kevin and Jeannie about that statement and how they're doing. In terms of Crowley's statement, that is way too little, way too late. The first event, the assault in the locker room, happened on September 25th.
Yeah.
And Johnathan immediately reported it to a coach, and nothing happened. On October 12th, the family went to the police, and things appeared to be like things were going to happen. But the police claimed that they were doing an investigation. And it took pressure from us on the police and the district attorney's office to actually try to bring charges against 7 students, 5 of whom assaulted Johnathan in the locker room and 2 who assaulted him on subsequent days. And so in December, we were informed of that. We don't think there are enough charges, by the way, and there are no charges against adults. But the police finally informed us that in February, they were going to seek charges at a clerk of magistrate's hearing against those 7 students. And my understanding is that that was continued at the request of at least one of the attorneys to a March date. So right now, months later, there are no charges against any juveniles and no charges being sought against any adults by the police department.
And what explanation do you get as to this no accountability, legal accountability at least, on the part of adults? What do you make of that, Peter?
It's infuriating. I know it is outrageous, and the family wants to pursue charges against the adults themselves because the police department and the district attorney's office are not doing what they should be doing by protecting Johnathan and seeking those charges themselves.
Peter, I mentioned that the Globe is reporting that there were incidents of bullying in past years. A statement put out again by the school system says they investigated those allegations. This is pre the Johnathan situation, and that they were, quote, unsubstantiated. How do you respond to that?
We know that the culture of the Woburn Memorial High School football team allowed what happened to Johnathan in September and after that. That goes to the coaches, it goes to the head coach, it goes to the athletic director. All of them need to be held accountable for what they allowed to happen to Johnathan, not only by the culture, but by the lack of supervision when there was supposed to be supervision.
When you say accountability, Peter, do you mean criminal accountability? Do you mean job loss? What are you looking for in terms of the adults involved in this situation?
At the very least, job loss. If there are crimes that were committed, then we want those charges brought in court.
Peter, one last thing for you. The Globe reports that 10 captains, some juniors, some seniors, on the football team, in a written statement came to the defense of the coach, of Belcher, and of the whole coaching team. What's your reaction to what they had to say? And by the way, they go out of their way to say they don't tolerate bullying, that sort of thing. But again, proceed to praise or at least come to the support of the coaching staff.
I see favoritism in that, Jim. If you look at the Globe article, there are the haves and the have-nots on the football team. And so it appears that the haves support what's going on and the have-nots become the victims.
You know, Johnathan, back to you for a second. Your parents are Portuguese and Puerto Rican. I know that in the Globe it says they identify as people of color. You made a statement to the Globe about if you had been white and the people who assaulted or harassed you had been people of color, there might have been a different outcome. What did you say and what did you mean?
I'm pretty sure I would have been expelled by now.
So you think there's racism involved in this too?
Yes.
Parents, do you feel the same way, starting with you, Kevin? Do you think that part of the...
Absolutely.
Expand on that for me. Why do you say absolutely?
Just like Johnathan said, if he was white and this happened to another white teammate, it'd be fine. But how he is race, the color, that's what they're doing.
You know, Kevin, before I leave you, your wife and Johnathan talked about how they've been affected by this. How's your life changed?
Oh, it definitely changed big time.
How so?
Definitely worried about him.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, on the phone with him, texting him, making sure he's safe, he's eating, he's waking up.
You know, Peter, finally, in the last minute we have, we talk a lot in this society about justice and accountability. You explained what you thought accountability would be for the parents. What is an outcome, an end result that you think, I mean, nothing will undo what was done to Johnathan and his family. What's a fair end result here?
There needs to be accountability for the adults who were supposed to protect Johnathan and did not. So that's the coaching staff, that's the athletic director, that's the principal, that's the superintendent. We know that these things have been reported before. We know that these things have happened before, yet many of the adults are still in positions of power within the district, and they need to be held accountable. We have given notice to the school district and to the city of Woburn that we intend on filing a civil lawsuit against Woburn.
Fair enough. Peter, Kevin, Jeannie, and particularly Johnathan, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would say to the coach, the principal, and the superintendent, I would urge you to show the same level of courage Johnathan had by being here, and I invite all three of you to join me as well. Thank you again for your time. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow for a look inside one of New England's best-kept secrets, winter surfing. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you for watching. Look at that guy. Please stay safe.
New dawn.
New vibe.
New duo.
I'm looking forward to that, yeah.
Join me, Paris Alston,
And me, Jeremy Siegel,
for GBH's Morning Edition with the local news and fresh insights you need.
to start your morning and inspire your day.
You know, you gotta live life on the edge a little bit. We're here weekdays from 5 to 10 on 89.7 and gbhnews.org. We got it. Let's go. It's a new dawn.
See you in the morning.